Right. Good evening again, everyone. So my name is Tamika Maxim, and I am a member of the GYBN Caribbean Steering Committee. I'm also the official lead for iguanas. The iguanas that are here in the call, you would have seen me interacting at the beginning, at the inception of the formation of the group, but the other steering committee members have been assisting me as well throughout the past weeks, as I am in my last semester of school. But welcome to section 4 of the GYBN Caribbean Youth Diplomacy course. Today we're going to be discussing the procedures of regional and international conferences and the role of youth in these spaces. So just a reminder before we start and introduce our presenters, your mics and cameras have been disabled for this session as with past sessions, and you may use the Q&A function on the webinar feature. It will either be at the top or the bottom of your screen depending on your device. So today we have two lovely presenters with us. We're going to be having Miss Tishia Jean-Baptiste and Miss Crystal Chesney. We will be starting off with Ms. Tishia Jean-Baptiste, and she will be addressing how CARICOM Secretariat supports biodiversity negotiators under the Convention of Biological Diversity. And Ms. Crystal Chesney will be looking at multilateral environmental agreements and the background of international conferences and their importance. So I will start off with Ms. Tishia um, and share the presentation. Tishia, you can go ahead, just
Yes,
confirm with me if you can see everything in a second.
sure. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Tamika. I'm not seeing the presentation yet, but while it's being loaded, let me just introduce myself. I am a senior officer with the CARICOM Secretariat. I work with the Sustainable Development Program. I've been at the Secretariat for the last 6 years. Served in a previous role as a project coordinator for the 5 years, working on the biodiversity multilateral environmental agreements. And so a lot of the work that I will share, all of the examples will be about how we supported our biodiversity focal points in terms of building the capacity and preparation for the Conference of the Parties for the past 3 COPs, from 2020 in Montreal and the last one in Colombia. So it's a pleasure to be with you. Next slide, please. So quickly, in terms of looking at the CARICOM Secretariat, the Caribbean Community Secretariat, which is the principal administrative organ of CARICOM, and is headquartered in Georgetown, Guyana, for those who are not familiar. And our mandate is to provide strategic leadership, technical expertise, and coordination support to our member states. Established mainly to advance regional integration and cooperation. The Secretariat, it operates across economic integration. It operates around human and social development, economic integration, foreign and community relation. Those are the key pillars, which includes environmental governance. So within this framework, the Secretariat, it plays a very pivotal role in articulating and defending collective Caribbean interests at the international fora. So we'll note that as Caribbean interests are very important, especially as individuals, small island, developing states. We face many constraints, particularly when it comes to environmental issues at scales that do impact us and our livelihoods. So our ability to negotiate at an international level is very important. So pooling our expertise and fostering consensus as a region, it enables us as CARICOM member states to act in a very unified voice, and encourage us to present complex multilateral negotiation issues at a level where we have very limited resources within our region. We know that in most of our Caribbean countries, we only have one or two technical officers within the ministries who deal with negotiations on any particular convention. And I know Krista will be going into detail to talk about that. So particularly under the Biodiversity Multilateral Environmental Agreement, within the Convention of Biological Diversity. So the Secretariat supports its member states through policy coordination, convening of regional meetings, and preparation of our technical experts with briefs. We do regional briefs, which I'll speak more in detail later, and engagement with our development partners. So over time, it has helped us to play a central role in terms of coordinating as a regional hub, in terms of building capacity on particular initiatives relating to environment and sustainable development. And we do get a lot of support from our international partners to engage in these initiatives. Next slide, please. So before we go into just a little teaser in terms of just to know how much of our participants online know about CARICOM and the treaty. So I have this very quick question to ask about the 4 signatories to the Treaty of Chaguaramas, which is the treaty governing how we operate as the Caribbean community, which was signed on July 4th, 1973 in Chaguaramas, Trinidad. So these were our 4 main signatories. So if anybody could just in the chat, the Q&A, if you could name those signatories for us. 4 countries, so one clue is that they represent 4 countries and they were the prime ministers at the time for the 4 countries. I see Emily says Errol Barrow. That's correct. Yes, Trinidad and Tobago. Gabriela says Dr. Eric Williams. I see Eric Williams. Yes, I see Jamal saying Forbes Burnham. Correct. And one more is missing. Right, correct. So the 4 represent Guyana, Jamaica, Barbados, and Trinidad and Tobago. So we can move to the next slide, please, just to get the correct answers. Next slide, please. Yes, so those are 4 founding members of the treaty, and I encourage you, I'll put this QR code here if you'd like to learn more about the treaty and our founding members and more information on the CARICOM and the CARICOM Secretariat. Please scan the QR code and learn more information. Next slide, please. So in terms of CARICOM's role and looking at global biodiversity governance, next slide, please. Biodiversity really plays a very fundamental role in terms of our region, and it underpins our food security, our livelihoods, tourism, cultural heritage, and climate resilience. So CARICOM member states are globally recognizing the importance of biodiversity. We do have many rich biodiversity hotspots that we all are familiar with. And it's characterized by our endemic species across our terrestrial as well as our marine and coastal ecosystems, our coastal reefs, our mangroves, our tropical forests and freshwater systems. They all provide essential ecosystem services, including protection of our coasts, fisheries production, and carbon sequestration. At the same time, we know that the region is exceptionally vulnerable to biodiversity loss, driven by climate change, habitat degradation, pollution, invasive species, and of course, unsustainable resource use. So these pressures are compounded by our limited financial and human resources and small land areas and high exposure to very extreme weather events. So as parties to the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, countries, we are obligated to conserve our biological diverse countries and promote sustainable use and ensure fair and equitable use of our genetic resources. However, we do have challenges in terms of meeting those regulations. We do have all our countries signing on to many of the conventions. And consequently, as a secretariat, we've been able to frame how our countries go about in terms of highlighting the issues as national entities as well as regionally together. What are some of our constraints as a collective and how we can approach enhancing, negotiating, and leveraging what the areas that we as a region need support, and of course contributing to ensure that there is equitable and ways for us to implement those global outcomes. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we coordinate regionally in terms of how we engage with CBD. And this is a picture of Montreal, early mornings. We coordinate as a group very early in the morning. We usually have to get to the conference center before 8 o'clock to secure a space. And Krista will share her experience later, but we coordinate very early in the morning as a CARICOM body. Our negotiators have to come really early to sit so we can discuss the plan of action for the day. So the CARICOM Secretariat, it plays a central coordinating role in terms of supporting our member states' engagement in the process of the convention at COPs, including meetings of the parties and subsidiary bodies. So this coordination involves us facilitating consultations and identifying our shared priorities, areas of convergence, and strategically aligning ourselves with interests from our priorities ahead of the negotiations. So at this session, we actually plan out key areas that are central for us for the day, looking at the agenda. And again, Krista will go through some detail. So we also serve as an information conduit, disseminating in timely manner updates. So by the end of the day one, our negotiators will receive an update on what has some of the emerging issues. So at the next day morning meeting, we along with the technical officers can discuss those complex negotiation texts and prepare, whether it be in terms of briefing notes, statements, how as an individual country they could go to ensure that they present the issues and the priorities of their region. And that is not done alone. We do partner because, again, limited human resource capacity is a critical. So partnership is very important to how we engage with our member states as a region, and I'll share a little about that a little later. So by anchoring our regional engagement, it needs to be structured in terms of coordination. The secretariat, we enhance both the effectiveness and the credibility of our participation in the global governance. And that is critical in terms of enabling and adjusting as time goes, because sometimes we go to meetings and a room is not available. We need to just huddle together in a small space outside of the meeting area in preparation for what is to come for the day. Next slide, please. So how are we able to sustain our negotiation capacity? There are a few areas that we negotiate, and I'd just like to just show you this picture. We help build our capacity of our member states. We see in the middle, you'll see a lady. This is Miss Enika Nicholas. She's the negotiator, and she's actually now the COP president for the Nagoya Protocol. And she represents Antigua and Barbuda, but she also represents the region. So we've been able to strategically build the capacity of our member states to ensure that they gain leadership. We also see at the bottom some of our ministers. We have Guyana minister, we have St. Kitts and Nevis to your bottom left. We have Barbados minister and also Dominica, and also we have them engaging. So we do have representation at the high level, attending those meetings to ensure that the emphasis is there in terms of our leaders repeating, showing, highlighting the concerns and reiterating their national positions, but as well as their regional positions. And we also ensure that we link our capacity to what is happening on the ground. So capacity skills are linked to the negotiating skills. We go through mock exercises in preparation for the sessions to ensure that our negotiators can understand what happens from the beginning of the process, to ensure that we enhance their confidence. So when they go into the COP sessions, they're more confident in terms of their proactive engagement as a region on what is required and what are the processes for the day and for the next 2 weeks. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, so early engagement and foundations are very important. One of the early milestones of CARICOM Secretariat supported by diversity negotiators has been our ability to have preparatory regional workshops. And this usually takes place about 2 months before. That is critical to what happens on the ground. Next slide, please. So at those meetings, preparatory meetings, we do have full-on mock sessions. We have workshops where the representatives who will be going on to the negotiations at the conference of parties go through the agenda. We look at the critical tech areas, understanding what the agenda items are, what are the negotiation texts to be discussed, what are some of the dynamics that would ensure effective participation. So the regional coordination and solidarity is important. So at the end of this preparatory meeting, we have key or common positions, priority issues that are agreed at the regional level. Some countries, it may not apply to all, but largely across our member states, we have found common positions that we as individual countries, they are able to address on behalf of the region. So we note that foundation to the engagements will be establishing a model in advance and linking the national priorities to the regional priorities. Next slide, please. So support during, I'm giving the example of at the COP15 that happened in Montreal. So regional negotiation support is facilitated through discussions that are guided by the negotiators on biodiversity targets and strategies. So at the end of COP15, you would have seen I believe it's 192 countries agreed to the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. These are 21 targets to guide what countries will implement for the next, I believe, until 2030. So as small island developing states, we have to ensure that the special circumstances of states is part of that consideration. So it's important for us to emphasize the special provisions that we as small islands need to address, particularly when it comes to a capacity building, technology, and financial support. And thirdly, looking at international regional engagements, CARICOM having strengthened ties with our international partners is important to ensure that we can amplify the perspective. So you'll see during the COP process that Caribbean countries will come together as a group of Latin America and the Caribbean. This is the grouping that they will negotiate. And Krista will go into more detail. But you also see the negotiators aligning with, for example, the Pacific SIDS, the Pacific Islands, which have similar concerns as small island development states. So those types of international partnerships, it's important to highlight your issues when you go into the conference of parties. Next slide, please. So as I also mentioned, preparatory support. So this is an example of preparing for the last conference of parties in Colombia, excuse me. So you'll note these two ladies at the front. These were the youth representatives that we also had as part of the preparatory training workshop that we did in Miami. And youth, they were facilitated through GYBN to be part of the COP process, as well as they went on to attend COP16. And that is very important. I wanted to highlight that to you. The inclusion of youth, not only as advocates, but seeing themselves contributing to the preparatory process to ensure that countries know of the youth concerns and seeing how youth can be as a support, as a partner in the negotiation process is very important. And also the youth engaging and providing that voice that the countries may not necessarily have taken into consideration during this stage. So the focus is not on just national coordination, preparing for the international process, but it's also about how youth can support the preparatory process as well as on the ground support at the conference of parties. So the sessions during the preparatory meeting are concentrated mainly on the GBF and how monitoring and resource mobilization can be included, especially in the draft text. Capacity building and coordination is another area. The workshop is there to enhance their capacity, to learn from one another. We have some senior negotiators. So we usually have a balance of senior negotiators with younger negotiators. And it's important to ensure that the junior negotiators can learn from the senior negotiators and bring them along. So having that prep training is important for them to understand. We also, as a secretariat, we develop a delegate guide. That delegate guide is particularly for the newer, younger delegates coming into the process to understand from even before registering for the conference of parties, what is the process, and just preparing. So we have a delegate guide that we update every COP to provide to our negotiators. And strengthening our regional capacity. So advancing preparation as a secretariat, we ensure that delegates do engage meaningfully. We're not just sending them there with no knowledge and information. We also share a lot of additional resource material. Particularly, we invite experts. We do webinar series where we invite experts on the different agenda topics. We also work along with the CBD Secretariat, and you have experts to share their knowledge and perspectives on the key agenda items as well in preparation for the COP. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, an important aspect of supporting our negotiators is partnerships. The work that we do requires a lot of support, financial, human, technical. These are group you would have seen Helena at the last session. So from the OECS. So we do a lot of the COP preparing our negotiators along with the OECS Commission. And as partners, we collaborate. We have the regional preparatory meetings. We engage with our experts through our partners in order to support negotiators effectively. These partnerships continues to help us in terms of our limited financial abilities to ensure that the countries receive the financial, the technical, and the institutional support in preparation. It's also important because partnerships helps us to align initiatives that are happening across the region to ensure that there is a reduction in duplication of initiatives. So coming together as one voice, we ensure that the OECS and any other regional entities that undertake biodiversity within the region, we're all speaking from the same hymnal. It's something I like to say a lot. We're all singing the same song. The countries see that we're working together because at the end of the day, it's all for one region that we're engaging in these initiatives. And as I mentioned, accessing expertise and best practices is important. As partnerships, we enable access to global experts and emerging best practices. It's important in terms of ensuring that the dynamic. So we'll engage with the European Union, for example, to learn. We'll invite them to speak, particularly at the meetings of the group of Latin American and the Caribbean. We'll invite them to one of our sessions to share what the EU is focused on and what are some of the synergies and areas we can support one another in preparation for the COP. Next slide, please. So looking ahead, some of the things that we've done, some of the outcomes that have come out of our support for our negotiators in the region. So this is just one example of our partnership with the OECS. We do have a technical reports that come out in showing not only to our funding partners, but also to our ministers, to our policymakers, what has been some of the outcomes from this session. So you go to this session, really and truly, what happens? What has taken place? The delegates have been engaged increasingly. They have developed their skill in handling complex technical issues and expressing their priorities nationally and regionally effectively. And we've seen that over the years, the progress of our negotiators, the confidence and the improved coordination. Now that CARICOM coordinates, it's not official, but informally at COP, we ensure that there is coordination as CARICOM. And better coordination results in consistency. It encourages credible positions and it boosts our influence as a region in the CDB process. And also capacity building, it helps connect our negotiators' outcomes to the national actions on the ground. So by improving our understanding at the national level, the technical officers are able to articulate through their national consultation what are the issues and how it aligns to, for example, what is happening in St. Lucia and how that aligns to what is happening in Dominica and how these two countries can learn from one another, share successes, share lessons to be learned, and support one another. And finally, the network of experienced negotiation is strengthened. As I said, we started off with junior. We have quite a number. When we started off this process in 2020, we had a number of junior officers who now been promoted to more senior officers. And now the mentorship across the different levels within the ministry is another thing. We talk a lot about legacy, and as people continue to develop within the countries, it's important to create that legacy, to have the handing of, so the things that have happened, there's a transition of knowledge. So knowledge isn't lost. We don't want there to, we're strategic, particularly with encouraging this diplomacy course. That is this a transition of knowledge. Things that have happened in 2020, somebody coming into the process in 2026 would be able to take this report and to learn, to understand what has taken place, what are some of the things that they did, the strategies they used, the positions that the countries and the region developed in 2020, and apply it now as they continue to develop new positions going into the next scope. Next slide, please. So finally, what is the future direction in terms of CARICOM and how we continue to support our biodiversity negotiations? You would know that COP17 is coming up in October in Armenia. The theme for that COP is taking action for nature. So as the global biodiversity governance continues to evolve, we need to prioritize, the countries particularly to prioritize the implementation of the global biodiversity framework. Resource mobilization continues to be a challenge for us as small island developing states. We continue to engage in different processes, and the CARICOM now serves as a technical and scientific cooperation center. And through this technical and scientific cooperation center, we're able to engage with partners that we've not been able to in the past, to ensure that we can prioritize, in particular, biodiversity, continued support for our biodiversity negotiators. Investing in our capacity building is very critical as we lead up to COP17. Regional coordination and strategic partnerships is very vital. And as we prepare, the plan is to have a preparatory meeting this year in July. And so we're working towards that. And certainly, of course, youth will be part of that process as well, whether it be in person or virtual. We would ensure that youth voices are part of the process of preparing for the upcoming COP. Supporting our member states in areas on our digital sequencing information, and I advise you to look it up. So DSI is an emerging issue when it comes to biodiversity and genetic species, and fair and equitable access and benefits from genetic resources that are found in the region. And so we're encouraging those countries who haven't signed yet to sign on to the Nagoya Protocol, which is critical. And I invite you to look that up and do some research on what the Nagoya Protocol is. It's a protocol under the CBD Convention. So developing in areas of biodiversity finance is also very critical for our member states. And of course, looking at the convergence of climate and biodiversity strategies. We tend to hear a lot about climate change, but we're working towards ensuring that there is a synergy. People understand that integrating climate change and biodiversity is very strategic and critical to how we can gain more resources for biodiversity. And finally, as a secretariat, we're committed to ensuring that there is equity in terms of participation and promoting sustainable development towards global governance. So ensuring that as a region, we continue to have a voice within the Conference of the Party framework. And that is very important as we move ahead towards COP17. So the countries will be taking place in many processes. We have the SAPSTA coming up, followed by the SBI, and then COP17. So we have to ensure that our member states continue to be prepared and engaged during these processes. I think that's my last slide. If you have any questions, you could put it in the Q&A, and I will take questions following Krista's presentation. So thank you very much for listening.
Okay, thank you, Tisha. That was a very insightful presentation. I think what stood out to me the most was the intense process that happens behind the scenes, just to ensure the protection of the ecosystems that we have in the Caribbean. So the preparatory sessions and the workshops, I think that they're really necessary to assist in highlighting priorities and concerns, as well as building capacity. And evidently it is working, especially with the outcomes that you mentioned, particularly that succession between negotiators and information. So that basically sets us up for a sustainable process as we go throughout and experience more COPs. So That was really good. I really enjoyed it. I hope that the attendees also enjoyed it as well. And I'll now introduce Crystal Chesney. So Crystal Chesney is a development and governance specialist with over 10 years of experience in biodiversity conservation, participatory governance, and regional environmental policy. She has led major initiatives across CARICOM, including pioneering Guyana's first FPIC guidelines and supporting Caribbean delegations at UN Biodiversity COP16. She is a Chevening Scholar from 2019 to 2020 with a Master's of Science in Conservation and Rural Development and has recently seen awarded the 25 Influential Women Leaders Award in Guyana this year. Her work spans stakeholder engagement, sustainable livelihoods, forestry governance, and community-driven environmental planning, engaging more than 10,000 stakeholders. So, Crystal, we're very excited to hear what you have to share this evening. You can go ahead and share your screen, and you are free to start presenting when you're ready.
Okay, great. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our presentation for tonight. I know you're a little bit tired. You had a long day, but I'm looking forward to us getting into this conversation because it's really, really good that you guys are preparing for events like this. And I'm hoping that at some point in time, we're able to meet up. For my presentation for tonight, let me put this in slideshow mode. I wanted to give you a guide through global biodiversity governance and really looking at some of the MEAs and walking you through my most recent experience at the UNCBD COP16, kind of putting you in my shoes for a bit as we get into the convention on the CBD and what it's like being a negotiator live on scene. But before we get into that, this is kind of what the roadmap is going to be. We're going to understand, for those that are not aware or for those that are aware, to give them a refresher, we're going to understand what and how did we derive at the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, or what we call the CBD for the most part. We're going to talk a little bit about the CBD structure and its architecture. Some people call it the plan of work. We're going to talk about that structure and why it exists. And then we're also going to talk about negotiation and why negotiation is an important component of the structure of the CBD. And then you guys are going to walk through my experience, the good, bad, the ugly. All right, so let's get into this presentation. Now, first of all, let's just take a step back and stock take. Biodiversity matters. Why? Because sadly, we are experiencing our sixth mass extinction. But if you notice why this extinction is happening, it's being driven by some of the activities we do as humans on Earth. And because of that, there's about 1 million and plus species that are actually being threatened with extinction right now. And really and truly, not just species and animals, but also the environment, the ecosystem, the space where we and these animals and plants exist. All of that right now is being shaken up in a bag, and things don't look very great for us at this point in time. And particularly when we think about the Caribbean region, because we have a lot of endemism, meaning there's a lot of wildlife, there's a lot of plants, animals that are just found where you live, where I live, where we live. And these animals are just adapted to live there, in the island, on the area. But when things are going out of whack, their survival is actually being threatened at this point in time. Coral reefs, mangroves, etc. And so really and truly, our biodiversity, whether you're in the region or not, is on the threat. Some of them I actually wanted to highlight tonight. So the white-fronted capuchin, they're facing a reduction in their populations in Trinidad. Jamaica's actual national flower is actually being endangered. Did you know that? Mangroves in Bahamas are going through so much turmoils. And the hawksbill turtle that we all love and share within our Caribbean region is actually critically endangered. So there's a lot happening on the scenes. I mean, these are just a snapshot of what I have, but I see a lot of you in the room. My oil friend, he's there. He basically wants to know what's happening in your country. What's happening in your country? What species, what plant, what animals, what ecosystem you are aware of that might be under threat or is under pressure in your country. You can definitely go ahead and use the QA system to put your name, your country, and kind of what animals you're aware of, right? Georgette said mangroves. Yes. Mangroves are really they're taking a flinging right now. Any wildlife or animals that you can think of in your country, the mountain chicken is the frog now. They're going through some turmoils, no? A species of corals. The corals are really getting it bad. This water warming up in the ocean, really stressing it out. Seagrasses, yeah, rising sea levels affecting them. Coral reefs again, sargassums coming into Barbados and mashing up the place. The green monkey, that's really interesting. Leatherback turtles, sister rock iguanas on the Cayman Islands are really having it out. My goodness gracious. Yeah, the coral reefs. Oh, yeah. Jamaican blackbird. Oh, I see something about Belize and Guatemala, Mexico. The American river turtle. My goodness. Everything in the sea is fighting for its life, apparently. The jaguars in Suriname. The yellow spotted turtles in Guyana. Yep. So there's a lot happening with our wildlife. There's a lot happening with the ecosystems around us. And really and truly, it's alarming now because we can see that they're being affected. Thank you so much for your contributions. Given the fact that we on a global scale have been seeing this happen, if we go back in history in 1992, that glorious year, a lot of amazing things happened. One of the amazing things that happened was this summit. The Rio Earth Summit that occurred from the 3rd to the 14th of June 1992 was one of the largest global meetings that we've ever had. And what that means, it means that heads of states, representatives from different countries, NGOs, international corporations came, sat down and said, yo, the earth is going through some stuff. We need to really fix it. We need to really fix the biodiversity, the ecosystem that's happening now. And you know what? That was one of the best decisions that we ever did as humans on Earth because this Rio Summit birthed these 3 conventions, these 3 international conventions, a club. Everybody signed up to these different conventions, have decided as a member state, as a party to this convention, we want to be able to do something about what's happening with not just biodiversity, but also to ensure that the development that we do as people is sound. And so the first 3 conventions, or the 3 that came out of this Rio Summit, is the CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversity. It's a binding legal agreement with all party members or countries that signed up to it to conserve biodiversity, to use resources sustainably, and also to share the benefits. So when we do sell or we make medicine, etc., the benefits go to everyone that was involved, not just the big corporations. Then the next convention that was birthed from the Rio Summit is the one that most of you might know about, the UNFCCC, or the Climate Change Convention. Everybody talks about this one. Everybody wants to go to this one. This was a global treaty to address greenhouse gas emissions. And then the one that not everyone might be aware of, but this 3rd convention is still very important. And this is the UNCCD. This is a convention to combat desertification. So really, it is linking the environment and developing sustainable land management. Because we need land. We need the land for the food. We need the land for the flowers, the scenery, the plants. It's connected to the ocean. So all 3 of these conventions were birthed from that Rio Summit. That was a grand gathering. And you've probably been hearing this term all the time, sustainable development. Sustainable development was that global goal that came out of this Rio Summit. So really and truly, This was an event, a gathering that was necessary in 1992. What we are going to be looking at specifically is this convention, the CBD convention, the one that we are conserving biodiversity, using resources sustainably, and sharing benefits. This convention here. Notice the logo, right? So wherever you see this logo, you know it's CBD, right? And so in this convention, we have 196 parties. What I mean, it means 196 countries have signed up and say, yeah, we want to be a part of this. We want to be able to ensure that our country protects our biodiversity, our country uses our resources sustainably, and our country is going to do everything that it can to ensure that resources, the benefits from the uses of the resources are shared equitably with indigenous peoples, with local communities, with farmers, with, etc. The benefits are shared throughout and not just with the corporate. The CBD is big for this. And the CBD came into force in December 1992. Now, what is the CBD architecture? Meaning, we hear CBD all the time, this big term. It's actually broken out into a design, an architectural design. What does that mean? It means that the CBD in itself is not just an organization. The CBD has what's called the Conference of the Party, or COP. Remember, we just said how many persons? 196 parties that signed up. So those 196 make up this Conference of the Party. This conference, where all of those representatives and negotiators from those countries come, is where we make the highest decision making. So all the decisions for what we do globally for biodiversity in those three main areas we talked about happens when everybody comes together. This is the highest level of decision making. We all come together as a world to make those decisions. Amazing, right? Now, in the meantime of countries coming together, who manages things in the back? We always need admin. Admin is important. And so really and truly, this CBD has what's called a secretariat. The secretariat is housed in Montreal, Canada, and the secretariat does this important job. It organizes our meetings, it prepares our reports, it coordinates all of the bodies. It does a lot of the hard work in the background. So when these countries come together to make the decisions, the secretariat does a lot of the arrangements and the logistics, etc. They're doing the heavy lifting. Now, the CBD also has what's called subsidiary bodies, and we'll talk about them a little bit later, but there are three of them now. There are three of them since the last COP. So since the first COP, which is when countries came together and met, so now we have three subsidiary bodies. I'll explain what that means, hold that out. We're going to get to that. But so far, we remember that the CBD, this convention that has those three main goals, is broken up into COP, the Conference of the Parties, where all of the members come. Is then broken up into the Secretariat, which is like the admin arm that does a lot of amazing work. And then it has what's called subsidiary bodies. Now, let's talk a little bit about COP first. COP, or the Conference of the Parties, where all of the parties come together, it happens every 2 years, right? Every 2 years. So let's say it happened this year, 2026. The next time it would happen again is 2028, right? COP is happening this year. Meets every 2 years. All of the parties, nearly every country in the world that has signed on to it, that said, yes, we want to be a part of this convention, they come together. And what we do is that we sit together and we say, we want the world to look like this. So we are going to have clear targets, clear actions of what we are going to do. We also want to look at some of the things that we did. What has been our progress since the last time we met? Have we done anything new? What's been our progress? And then at that point in time, we start to make very binding decisions together as the world. We sit and say, together, we are going to continue to do this. These are the decisions that we are going to hold ourselves and you, every other party, to. so that we can continue to reach this goal. Those 3 goals we had. Remember what those 3 goals were? Can you remember what those goals were? Can anybody remember? Can you put that in the Q&A? Can you remember what those 3 goals were for the CBD? No? Nobody can remember? It's a very tough crowd, man. Conservation, yeah. Sustainable use, fair benefit sharing. Thank you so much. So every time the conference of the parties come together, which is all of most of those world leaders, every time they come together, they do something very monumental. So the first time on this timeline that we're looking at, which is the Rio Summit, they came together and we got the CBD started, right? The next time they came together was in Bahamas. So for the very first COP, the very first conference of the party meeting happened in Bahamas. Is there any Bahamians here? Yes, it happened. The very first one where all of the world leaders came to, they came to your country. If there's any Bahamians here, they came to Bahamas, and then what they started to do every time they met was make very clear understanding of how they were going to work together. So the next time they decided, well, what would our rules be? How could we work together? What would our rules be? What would the institution look like? How would we come together and negotiate? What would negotiation look like? So from COP2 to COP6, they spent a lot of time trying to figure out that and come to an agreement of what the rules would be like for every member of state when they came. Then we decided on what the program of work was going to be. What that basically means is when we come together, what exactly would we do? And then we went back to our country. What exactly would we do? Remember, we're doing these things for those 3 main top ideas of what the CBD COP is, right? Then we started to discuss at COP9 that, listen, not just protecting biodiversity that is important. We need access and benefit sharing to happen. We need people to benefit from the biodiversity that's in their backyards that somebody else might be coming and reaping or trading and using. And so many good decisions started to come out of the COP. The last one that was held is COP16, and this is the one we will be talking about that happened in Cali, Colombia. At this COP, we had a very new system, a very new framework to measure our progress. Remember, we have to have a system, a global system where we're going to protect biodiversity, we're going to develop sustainably, and we're also going to ensure that benefits are distributed to all types of stakeholders, whether they're indigenous stakeholders, local communities, etc. And Cali COP was able to look at a new framework, which we will talk about later, which is the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And if you're in this field, you've probably been hearing about a lot of things that came out of the framework, right? 30 by 30, etc., etc. And so now we're going into COP17, and I think Tisha touched base on that a little bit more. So COP is a big deal. Why? Because all of these parties come together to keep making the decision to protect Earth and to develop sustainably. Now, remember I said stick a pin on subsidiary bodies. We're going to get to that a little bit. Well, here we are. Before COP16, which was the COP in 2024, only these 2 subsidiary bodies existed. SAPSTA, which is the Scientific and Technological Advice. This is SAPSTA, and this subsidiary body is where in between those 2 years that COPs happen, SAPSTA and SBI happen every quarter, every couple of months. Why? Because some member state representatives will meet in smaller groups to talk about what should be our scientific advancement, what should we monitor. When we monitor coral reefs, what should we all monitor around the world? What should be some of the things that we look for? What are we measuring? When we're looking at mangroves, when we're doing bird counts, what should be the standard way to do bird counts? What should be the standard way to do mammal counts? They're looking at all of the technical recommendations to help all of the countries that have signed on to this convention to start monitoring and measuring wildlife. Because how do we know what we're protecting if we don't know what exists and how much exists? And then there's SBI. SBI is a subsidiary body where we're looking at more implementation and policy. What does that mean? It means as member states, although yes, we will figure out how to monitor biodiversity ecosystem, we need to learn how to do it. You know, what is our capacity? Building our capacity, going and teaching us, the government, NGOs, youth groups, how to do these things, giving them the finances to do that because, well, people got to eat, buying equipment, etc., having these meetings, having these youth groups, having these forums, they're all funded. And SBI helps the COP to figure out where could we get the money so that members of states can get grants and monies to be able to do these projects, to be able to do the training. And most recently, I'm so excited about this subsidiary body on Article 8J. This is the one I witnessed got developed at COP16. This is the one where we're specifically saying throughout the years, we're going to ensure that when we collect information about scientific research, when we collect information about capacity building, we also need to collect information globally and share information globally about Indigenous and traditional knowledge from local communities, from Indigenous villages. They hold so much information about the ecosystem and about animals and about wildlife that can actually help us to better protect them. And it's really important that they are factoring to how we protect biodiversity in the world. So our three main subsidiary bodies, SAPSTA, SBI, and the subsidiary body in Article 8J, filter in now into when we come together every 2 years at COP to help us to make a holistic decision as the world about what we do with our biodiversity, about how we develop ourselves, and about how we share benefits with each other. So let me see if you are really focusing. Are we paying attention here? Can you recall how many conventions came out of this Rio summit? Can you recall? All right. I've got 1 thumbs up, 2 thumbs up. Oh my God, they're trickling in. Okay, I've got several. All right, good. So the Rio Summit, thank you so much in the Q&A as well. 3 conventions. Great. Next one. This subsidiary body provides implementation guidance to the CBD. Which one of them provides implementation guidance? Can you remember? I've seen a lot of thumbs up. Anything else? Ooh. Sorry, technology. I've got SBI. I've got SAPSTA. I've got Article 8J. Which one? All right, let's go back really quickly to remind ourselves. Implementation comes from SBI. Implementation, so how we're going about doing it. What finances, what capacity building. Implementation comes from SBI. Thanks for that. Okay, let's press on. So now that we understand the architecture of the CBD, we understand that the CBD is all the countries that have signed up to it, and all of those countries that have signed up to it, they make up what's called the Conference of the Party. We understand that the CBD has a really strong admin arm called its Secretariat, right? And we also understand that the CBD works with 3 subsidiary bodies, SBI, SAPSTA, and Article 8J, that help us to think through the 2 years that between the 2 years that we need to meet. What should be the type of research we do, where the funding should come, how the project should be implemented, what Indigenous and traditional knowledge should we start thinking about and incorporating. All of that comes together. And all of that comes together so that we can sit as a global community to negotiate. Why is negotiation important? Because this is what this presentation is about. It matters that we negotiate because we need to build a consensus. There is no one party or one country deciding what the entire world does. for those three main areas for us to conserve our biodiversity. So we need a consensus. We need the entire world's community, whether you're rich, you're poor, you're in the northern and the southern hemisphere, you're living on an island or you're landlocked. We need all of those voices to come in. All of those voices must come in and have and be in agreement. We're not voting. We have to settle on an agreement, and I'll explain what that means just now, because how do you get everybody to make and to come to that conclusion? How? And then we also need to negotiate for equity and inclusion. Indigenous peoples need to be a part of it. Local communities and their representatives, women and their youth group representatives need to be there. It needs to be a total voice because we all live on Earth. We're all in this floating rock in space. And so we all need to have a say. Why this presentation moving, right? And then, of course, science needs to meet policy. So it needs to be the case that while we are doing research and the science evidence comes in, the policies, and if we are to talk about what policies are, the policies where we need to not take what we've researched and now turn it into laws, turn it into guidance in our own countries, in our own communities, etc. There needs to be a bridge there. And these negotiations help that to funnel in with what we can see in terms of science, but what it means to us in our day-to-day life or how our country runs itself. And then it also is important for us to negotiate for finance and accountability. Remember, we talked about SBI is also really important to getting all countries able to access funds, because really and truly we can only protect, we can only learn, we can only get the skills if there's money. We like to have a saying in Guyana here, I'm Guyanese and I live in Guyana, that conservation without money is a conversation. You need money to do work. You need money for the coral reefs. You need money for the mangroves. You need money to protect the birds. You need money to educate and sensitize people, okay? So negotiation puts us in a space where we are equitable. It puts us in a space where we bring in that science education to make laws and policies, but it puts us in a space where we negotiate how we get to the money to do all of this. It's very important. Now, negotiation gives this as a byproduct. What is this? This is a decision. This is what a decision looks like. This is a decision. So we all meet up for these documents. This is a decision here for agenda plan of action. How we are going to think about gender within the CBD. Of course, because it's really important to bring that in. Gender is affected by what's happening. And there we see protection of biodiversity and ecosystems very differently. Why I wanted to show you this is there's a lot of work that goes into making just this paper. We're going to get into what that work is. What I want you to focus on is 1, 2, 3, 4. These are what we call the actions that member states would sit, when I say member states, countries, the negotiators would sit and fight for hours for these lines, specifically words within the lines. So for example, let me say something like this. Here you see point 2, it says, urges parties and invites other governments, this is governments that are not a part of the CBD, subnational governments, cities, and other local authorities to implement the Gender Action Plan. I'm going to stop there. This line here, this one word that says urges, we could spend 3 to 4 hours arguing whether or not it should be urges or it should be invites. And there's a reason why certain words are argued or negotiated for. For example, urges is a very strong word. It means that the convention really wants member states to implement this gender plan. If we use this word here in line 3, for example, invites, it means that member states can decide to do it or not do it. But through our negotiations with each other, what we're saying is that we really want member states to do it. And so with that, we would get back and forth fighting, because you might have some countries that don't want to have the document, right? You might have some countries that don't want to implement a gender plan. So they might argue and say, no, we want it to just say invite. Because remember, these are legally binding documents. If it says invite, it means that the country can interpret it as maybe we can, maybe we don't want to. You understand? So if it says urges, it means that yes, member states absolutely should institute. And so it means that countries now have a legal onus on them to ensure that they implement a gender plan when they're thinking about biodiversity. That is just a snippet of what you're about to see in the world of negotiation. But these texts that have the text numbers, etc., is what we go and we work to produce, that the world that signs up to this convention has to be guided by. Okay? And so a lot of this you can find on the CBD's website. Ooh, there's so much of things. Yeah, on the CBD's website, right? Yeah, dictation is very tricky, but dictation is important. So if you're doing law or environmental law, you'll learn a little bit more. This is the CBD's website, and there's so much more information on what I've been talking about. You can find information on the history of the CBD, the strategic plans, the decisions, which are those documents that come out of COP that we, as parties of the convention, have to follow. There's so much information that you can find, and I urge you to go on the website. Now, before we get what's called those COP decisions, that document I just sent you, an entire process needs to happen. I'm going to try to get through that process really quickly with you. But I hope so far you are enjoying the conversation so far. Two things can happen before COP starts. A non-paper, meaning a country or a group of countries can come together and say, look, for this particular topic, these are some of the things I want the whole world to actually start doing. And they could submit that document before COP even starts. And remember, we talked about those subsidiary bodies. Now, every time they meet at those subsidiary bodies, some amount of draft decisions are made, right? Some amount of decisions are made for research, or where money should come from, or how programs should be implemented. And those draft documents are also submitted ahead to the same CBD secretariat. Remember, the secretariat is at the back filing and away and organizing and preparing everything for when the conference of the parties come together. Now, when we come together as a conference of the parties, these documents kind of get combined and they produce what's called conference room papers. Now, I'm going to stick a pin there and take you to the journey of how we get to the conference room papers, right? Before, remember I said that you can, as a country, send some documents, kind of what you think should happen, or groups of countries can come together. Tisha would have discussed in her presentation that as a Caribbean group, as a regional group, as a Caribbean, we prepare together because voices are stronger as a group. And so, as she would have mentioned, CARICOM, OECS, the Caribbean Biodiversity Funds, they all come together and we have a regional workshop. We had a regional workshop in 2024, the 11th to the 13th of September. We met in Miami. We had youth representatives that were there, and we kind of talked about what our way forward was going to look like. Now, the Caribbean group also knows that strength is in numbers. So we also group up with Latin America. And so we create an even stronger group called GRULAC. GRULAC is our negotiation block, meaning this is a group of countries that usually meet up in the morning and we sit down together and we say, you know what, as a group, we're going to strategize what should be some of the things that we really fight for, because within our region, within the Caribbean and Latin America, we are struggling with climate change. We are struggling with what the other world is doing and how it's affecting our wildlife. So together, we're going to bring our voices. So our block that we negotiate with is called the GRULAC block. And so this was us preparing as a Caribbean group to get ourselves ready so that when we go to COP, we can be very strong with the GRULAC group. And these were some of the Caribbean negotiators that were there. Some of the faces you see, some of the faces you will see throughout, going through the series with you. But these were the negotiators from across the Caribbean that was at the last COP. Now, are you still with me? I know that was a lot of information so far. Are you still there? You still with me? Can I get a thumbs up? Can I get a yes? Okay, you're still here? Okay. I know it's a lot. It's a lot of information. Right now, do you have any questions or comments about anything I've said so far? Okay, I love this question from Stefan. How can we access the capacity building that's being done by SBI? Can individuals access it, or does it have to be registered by a legal entity? That's a really good question. Is Tisha still on the call? Tisha, are you still there?
Yes. That's a very good question, Stefan. So legally, the SBI are represented with, so countries, organizations can register. So before that meeting actually happens, countries, organizations must register to be a part of that meeting. Once you're a registered participant, you are able to access any of the information from that meeting during the meeting, but you must be there in person as the head of delegation, delegate representing that entity, whether it be as a country or organization. And that's how you get access to that information.
Really good information, though. Thanks so much, Stefan. But yeah, SBI is really cool. Trust me, really, really cool. And SBI trickles down to the rest of the country. So don't worry. I will get into that just now. Any other questions or comments? If no, I will.
Sorry, Crystal, let me just follow up to say, because I want to, so notwithstanding the registered national entity or organization, an individual can reach out to the national government to inquire on that information and get access. So it's not just, it's the responsibility of the entity, whether it be a national government or organization. So what happens after the meeting, the countries usually would have, say, article, a consultation at the national level where they present a lot of the outcomes from the sessions. So it's nothing, say, for example, an individual reaching out, saying they're interested in getting more and contacting the focal point for biodiversity, for example, in that country to get access to the information.
Yeah, so another way, if you don't need to register yourself, you can definitely find the focal point, the organization in your country that is responsible for paying attention and leading the convention and following everything and negotiating on behalf of the country. Yeah, your country will have one of those. So you can even contact them to see what information they have and how they're working through the capacity building, and whether your group, your organization, or even you could be a part of it. Really good question. All right, so if there's nothing more, we can move on. Great. Now, we understand the Rio Convention or the Rio Summit. We understand the 3 conventions that came out of the Rio Summit. We understand that we are dealing with the UNCBD. We understand that the UNCBD has 3 main architectural design: the Conference of the Party, the Secretariat, and we also understand that it has subsidiary bodies. And we know that this convention has 3 subsidiary bodies that do very, very unique things. Now, I'd like to take you to the journey of COP. Remember, do you remember what COP is? Conference of the Parties. Do you remember how often it happens? Every when? Can you remember how often it happens? Every 2 years, correct. Every 2 years, the Conference of the Parties happen. I see your question, Florentino. What is the biggest challenge for Caribbean and Latin American countries in reaching a unified agreement during these negotiations? Oh, so many things. Because remember, it's not individuals. The negotiators are there on behalf of their countries. So their countries might have different priorities that they want to really focus on. So, for example, your interest and my interest or our targets might be invasive alien species, right? Yes. So when it comes to the invasive alien species, the way I might want to treat invasive alien species here in Guyana, because I'm landlocked, might be very different from how, let's say, Haiti or let's say Barbados or so on, or Antigua wants to deal with invasive alien species because it's an island surrounded by water. It might be the case that we might go back and forth a bit when we meet as a block to say this might be the best way or best way to say a text than this, you know. So that sometimes can be the challenge based on some of our national circumstances. But at the end of the day, remember, COP is consensus. So we actually need to come to some unified decision so that the language can speak to both my landlocked situation and your island situation. I'm not sure if Tisha would like to add anything to that, but the question is, what is the biggest challenge for Caribbean and Latin American countries in reaching a unified agreement during these negotiations?
I think you answered the question very well, Crystal, and the example is very good. But I'll just give another example of genetic resources. In the Caribbean, we do have many genetic resources, and one of the key things we have to ensure is that the fair and equitable benefits of utilizing those resources are covered, particularly for our indigenous peoples and local communities. And that was one position that we as a region had as a priority going into the last conference of parties. There are some compromises that need to be made when you're negotiating, but to ensure that your priorities, you as a country or region, we may have 9 positions going to negotiations. We may or may not get all those positions being agreed at the conference, but our key interests may be covered within a final agreement, not all. So it's something that we really need to ensure that we negotiate, ensure that although we may not get, there are some red line areas that we say definitely don't want, but we need to ensure that in the spirit of compromise, that we have some options that ensure that we may not get all, but at least some aspects of our positions are considered and recognized.
Thank you so much for that. And did you notice that line that Tisha says, in the spirit of compromise? I tell you, after we are fighting for hours, I'm telling you, hours, 3-4 hours, the time is going. Somebody might jump up and say, in the spirit of compromise, let us please go with this text so that we can come together as a unified world for biodiversity. And that might actually be the key sometimes to us being able to reach a consensus. That key line in the spirit of compromise means that somebody might say, okay, I give in, let us go with your wording. Or someone might say, okay, I see your point. I will let go of what I want to do. So in that spirit of compromise, those are actually strong words at COP. And when you hear that, everybody relaxes and they say, oh, thank God, we're done arguing on this text now. I like this post from Raymond that says, what successes have you seen post-GRULAC compared to negotiating as a lone country? That's really good. What you must know is that countries, no matter what their economic statuses are, no matter what language they speak, they're all encouraged to make their contributions at COP. And I will explain what those contributions look like. They're all encouraged to do so, which is the great thing about COP, right? When a country, however, makes their contributions, there might be very differing views towards that contributions. And what you want is that country always gets support for that view. So for example, you might make the view that that mandates that, let's say, developed or developing nations, small and developing nations and countries in transition get the first dip in the money for training of young people. One country might put up their hand and say that this is the position for the language and therefore the wording should say it like this. If it is one country that says that, you might find that there's several other countries in the room that are developed nations and they don't want that. They might say, well, why do SIDS get the first dip in the money? And you might find more and more of them saying, no, 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 we do not agree with that text. It doesn't align with our priorities. It doesn't align with what we want. And you'll find multiple countries saying that. And what might end up happening is that that one country may have to say, in the spirit of compromise, they withdraw what they say. Versus when you are negotiating as a bloc. So you will make that entry, and then you will have your sister and brother countries within your bloc endorsing it. I agree. I agree. This is what I want. This is exactly what I'd like to hear. There's more support for you. And so there's a greater chance of what you're negotiating for coming to fruition. How well does that approach work? Okay, using your example of dealing with invasive species, what if the appropriate way to deal with the issue is in one country is different from the approach needed for another country? Is that accounted for? I really like that question, Ashley. It is. It is accounted for in the discussion. So, for example, some of what is discussed at COP is not necessarily extremely specific wording that only speaks to country context. COP language is broad and general that it may encompass a lot of various approaches. The key things is where and if something is going to happen and how it is going to happen and by whom. That is where the language might be molded. But of course, we're going to ask Tisha to come in and to give us a little bit more context on that.
So I wanted to actually use from the actual decisions of the COP on invasive species, and if you're free to look it up. So for example, you'll note target 6, which specifically deals with invasive alien species, and the decision language, you'll have one part of the decision that strongly advises using the precautionary approach. So that may apply to one country. And then another, this part of the decision talks about parties are encouraged to implement. So when Crystal spoke about the language of the difference between invites or encourages, you'll notice from the language of the decision, it gives allowance for a country to articulate at the national level whether they advise, they implement. So that language decides how a country is able to implement at the national level.
Thank you so much for that, Tisha. Definitely great initiatives, but yes, like you said, youth groups need to hold the countries responsible for some of the decisions that are made. And this is why it's very, very important. Sorry, you've gotten a sneak peek already. This is why it's very, very important that youth are very much involved in the country's affairs. And you must know who your focal point for the UNCBD is in your country. If you do not know who that focal point, that focal agency is, today is the day you figure out who they are, and then you approach them when they do have activities to be a part of it. To be a part of it. Because you, as youth, can shape the way the government, the policy makers, those focal points, will envision what biodiversity conservation and sustainable development looks like for your future. Okay. So let's go through the COP journey. Thank you so much for your questions. Now, this journey is us getting to the conference of the party where everybody is gathering, right? What we are going to look through is the lens of what I did through Cali, Colombia very soon. So very first thing after you've been registered and you are able to go to COP and be permitted to go inside is your registration and accreditation. What does that mean? Most of this is happening before you even get to COP, right? You need to be registered through GYBN or your national delegation, meaning through your government to be able to go to get your badge. For me, I came through St. Lucia. Now let me explain why. I attended COP not necessarily as a negotiator. I attended COP as a biodiversity advisor to the Caribbean countries. So I did not negotiate per se, but I provided that advice and the technical expertise along with a very, very skilled team to the CARICOM negotiators that were there. So I just wanted to put that out there. But when you register online and everything goes through and you land in country, you get your badge. But before we get there, let's go back. Before you get your badge, you need to orient yourself in the country because 9 out of 10 times you're going to a country that you've never gone before with languages that may not be English. And for me, I landed in a country where everybody spoke Espanol. Okay. My Spanish is poquito, it's very minimal. And so you have to get down, get on the plane, get to your hotel, figure out how to get to your hotel, first of all. Most of the times, if you go within the cup period, the secretariat, in their amazingness, organizes airport shuttles from the airport to most of the approved hotel venues. Okay, so most of the countries that are hosting the conference of the party will go through hotels. They will scrutinize them. They will make sure that they're up to standards, they're safe, etc. And you get housed there. I did not get to stay at one of those because those hotels were booked, but I stayed next to one that was very close to the other one. So you get in the country, you settle in, you get your bags, you gotta figure out public transportation, or for my experience in Cali, Colombia, I had all of these pictures, but now I don't have them. It's been 2 years. But they had buses that were earmarked for all of the cup parties. Remember, it's 100 and how much countries that are there, right? But even more, thousands of negotiators per countries and their advisors and their teams and all of that. So there's thousands of us from around the world in this one country. So they have designated buses for us. It will be marked UNCBD. The buses have their names on it, and in the buses, they go to a specific bus stop. So you have to find that bus stop. You got to figure out you're reading the signs to get to that bus stop. And then you got to be able to enter that bus stop and either show your badge, but if you haven't collected it as yet, you have to show it on your piece of paper. You get on that bus, you get in, you sign, you go through a very long line, you sign up, you prove that you are who you are with your ID, a blood sample. I hear, I'm joking, but with all of your details, you prove who you are, you take out your picture, and you get your badge. And this badge is stronger than your passport in that country. Let me tell you, okay? You always need to have this badge on you. This badge is saying to everybody that you were an expat and that you are here. And it's also there for security reasons because for us, where we were in Cali, Colombia, they had police everywhere. In the buses that were transporting us had polices with guns. Yes, big guns at each door. So every time we got into the bus, they would come out, let us walk in, and they're guarding the bus because we are coming from foreign countries, right? There's police by the supermarkets they know we will use. There's police by the restaurants, the hotels they know we will use on the road. There's heavy police and army and the military there just for us at COP. Yes, COP is a very big deal. So this badge has to be on you at all times so that if something should happen, which it rarely ever does, rarely ever does, you just, and one of the army or the police will actually come to you to render assistance immediately. So when I say this is strong, this badge is strong. It's very strong. And it's an honor to have this badge to be there truly supporting the world. Now, when you get to the venue after you signed up, merch. COP is so amazing in that they want you to really have a good experience. For me, I was able to pick up some water bottles, which I didn't even bring it, but I still have it. The goodie bags, there's so many good things inside of it. Notepads, a map, brochures, a fan. There's so many good things. Companies even collaborate with the government to give you like samples, business cards, etc. So merch, really good. And this water bottle really does save you because you need to keep refilling it. Also at the venue, when you get there after you collect your badge and your merch, you need to find your map. You need to orient yourself with that entire venue. Those venues, because they're hosting thousands of people, are huge. All over the place is labeled, and you need to get a map keep this map and be acquainted with the map. On that first day, nothing really happens just yet. So you need to really go and orient yourself where everything is, where the toilet is, where the restroom is, where the smaller meeting places, where the larger meeting places, where your huddle meetings are going to be kept, where the side, you got to know this thing. Good. Can remember, sometimes the map is not even in English, right? My laptop dying. Just give me 2 minutes, please. Woo. 2 minutes, please. I just plug this into the wall. Oh my God. Good, and we have power. So your map, really important. As well as on that first day, it is very important that you know all of the spaces. You walk around, you enjoy the scenery, because I'm telling you that is the last day you will ever see that space look so empty and scenic. The chairs, you take pictures of where the organizations that you want to meet, every conservation organization you could think about, you figure out where they are, because that is where you will go back to network with the people. So you got to figure out where they are. This is a lifesaver. This is the fountain of water. Let me tell you, you drink a lot of water at COP, because depending on the country, it could be so humid, you're thirsty all the time, and you don't have money to be buying all this water. These water stations, with using your water bottle, the same water here, was filled up at this station a lot of times. It is absolutely necessary to stay hydrated at COP, and you're figuring out all of this on the very first day, right? And then you take the time to go around COP and look at the scenery, because remember, COP is not just a sterile place. Conservation is not just pen and paper. Conservation is art. Conservation is beauty. Conservation is people. Conservation is culture. All of this come together in one space, and you take your time to look around and to see what is happening all the time. These sculptures were being done and prepared right in front of our very eyes. Every day you go, there's something new to look at, there's something new to see, etc. Every time you go, there is something new, and it's really such an amazing experience to have. Even at nights, based on your venues, things that look very plain during the day look very nice during the night. So depending on the different times that you're there, the venue looks amazing. So you really got to take your time and enjoy that very first day. That first day also has like an orientation. Oh, it's so beautiful. I don't have a video of that. I was very late to that. I was very exhausted, but my team members were able to go to the orientation. Music, dance. Oh, it's so beautiful to make you feel like you're really a part of something big in the world. It's absolutely amazing. Absolutely, absolutely amazing. Um, so I'm glad that you're here. Now, for your first day, do you think there's something that I would have missed that you would have done on your first day in a new country? What would have been some of the things that you immediately have to know, to check for, to see? What would be some of the things that you would be looking for? Yes. Yes, Ayana. I loved the experience. But we're gonna talk about the ugly and the good, the bad, and the ugly. You gotta take everything together with the cup experience. So we're gonna go into it. Martel has raised their hands. I don't know. Would you like to just type what you have? Meet the delegates, yeah? Definitely meet the delegates on your first day. Meet as much people as stuff. Let me tell you, your LinkedIn is filled after COP. You think you know people? You don't know people yet, okay? When you're done, you are going to have a stacked LinkedIn account. You're going to have network throughout the earth, all continents. You're going to know people, okay? Phone translator, absolutely a must. A phone plan, love that, Gabriella. Yes, I needed to get an eSIM. I needed to connect that eSIM. Meeting the native communities, yep. definitely knowing where that is, it's very important to understand the meeting points. A lot of networking is important, a lot. And networking for COP, but also networking outside of COP too. It's also very, very good. You meet people that become very good lifelong friends that you can actually travel to. Where the bathroom is, Danny, you and I, that is so true. Where the water is, where the bathroom is, where the bus works. Yep, clock it. What time the bus works, where do you get the bus from? That is so important. So important. Yep. As you're figuring out all of this for the first time, was there anyone that had difficulties going through all of this? Were they lost? And what if the badge was given to them that was lost? Oh, girl, Lashana, a lot of drama happened, Lashana. A lot of drama. ATM, Stefan, yes. How you need local money. Nothing happens without the local money. Finding a cambio, etc. Let me tell you, your badge can get lost, and that can be a little detrimental. I'm joking, but if it gets lost, you kind of have to go through the whole registration process all over again. And remember, getting into the venue is, we'll see just now, is not an easy thing to do. Most of the times you're not going by yourself. So that's a good thing. When you're going with groups, you can have other accredited persons, which that means they have their badge, can vouch for you to say this has happened, and they can help you in the process. Getting there your first time is hard, girl. Google Maps, Google Translate, Google everything is important to get you to navigate. And then also talking to the local people there about where's the best food spot, etc. Right? Getting the daily schedule. Yeah, networking, absolutely important. Understanding the protocols, understanding the country rules is key. Because what you don't want to do is commit an offense in a foreign country, in the people country. Knowing the country rules is key. Before you fly there, you should know what are things that can get you fined, what are things that are unlawful, etc. You need to be aware of that, right? Good, good, good. Jose, we're gonna get to your question just now. We're gonna get into that. I know I'm on this slide a little bit too long, so let me move now. So the journey continues, right? So we've just been registered. We've been acquainted with the area. As you know, there's a lot of pre-COP preparations with us, with CARICOM and OECS and CBF. But for you, with your youth groups, a lot of this is preparations for you, right? The next big thing is the opening plenary. What that means? It means that is when COP finally and officially opens. The conference of the party opens. This opening ceremony is absolutely amazing. We then look at the agenda. All of us as a country, as the world, we adopt the agenda. We say, yes, this agenda is what we want to discuss for the next coming days. And then we start to hear regional statements about COP. And that opening plenary is absolutely amazing. It's almost a little orientation. Please go on YouTube and look for the COP16 opening ceremony. We had indigenous songs, indigenous prayers, chants. It was so culturally based. Absolutely amazing, that opening plenary. And you feel like you're really a part of something. It feels big. Then we decide, when we look at the agenda, because there's so much important things to discuss at the plenary, what they do is break us up into what's called over here working groups. Sort of like breakout groups for big people. I'm joking, but yes, like that. Working groups allow us to group ourselves to go and discuss different topics such as climate change, invasive alien species, conservation, marine biology, all the things that we as a world have decided were key important areas to discuss. We break up into those groups and we go and we look at the text. Remember, draft and non-paper, as we talked about before. We look at those texts and we start negotiating on those texts. Right? So let me show you. Now, sometimes in the working group, you have two countries that go neck and neck. You know, no, we want this. No, we want that. Sometimes what we will do is say to them, look, form a smaller group and please try to see, and we'll have a third party in that group to try to see if they can come to a compromise. Because remember, at COP, we do not vote. We come to a consensus. So we must agree. And It's really, really good to see that happening. So I'll show you some pictures of that. We also have what's called a high level segment, meaning in that segment, high level negotiators, which are the ministers, will come and have their negotiations happening there. That's when COP becomes really alive, because these are like ministers of countries coming in with their possessions, and they come in with special security. COP venue is redesigned to support them because this is high level segment, because what a minister says is that, you know? So yeah, COP can get really interesting. So to get into the first plenary, what does this look like to you? Airport security. Yep. Every time you want to get into the venue, you have to go through TSA. Literally, you have to go through airport security. There's lines down the street. Rain or shine, you're standing up in the rain, you're standing up in the sun, in line one by one with your bag to go through airport security. You got to take out your laptop, you got to take out your bag, you got to take off your shoe, you got to take off your belt every time you go into the venue. So if you decide that you want to go home and take a nap and you want to come back, you got to go through airport security. You have to go through airport security. You got to go through security every single time you come to the venue, because why? We are delegates from around the world, and it has to be a safe space for everyone to feel free to just focus on the work that they're doing every single time. Airport security. And then this is what the plenary looks like. As you can see, everyone from around the world in this space. I'm telling you, this picture doesn't do justice. It was not the phone version I had then, but you could imagine what's happening, right? Big screen, the podium to the front. It's such a surreal experience. When you walk in, I think this is a video. When you walk in, I was very early. As you can see, tables and chairs just lining this venue for you to sit to get into COP. Okay, yeah. Like I said, it's not the best quality. I tried my best, man. But this was me at COP. Such a surreal moment. The lights, the sound, the scenery, the people, the different languages, everything is so surreal in the plenary. This is the big room where we all come together to have the final say. Now, if you notice on the tables, there's chairs directly to the table with the country names. Then there's this speaker where people, when they want to make a comment on a text or to argue against or to argue for, they will use this. When they press this button, it is specifically assigned to each country. So when they press this button, the person up here actually knows which country has just pressed the button. And then you will see the countries building up on the list, and they will pick the one that pressed the button first to go ahead and talk. Yeah. Now, if you notice, I have on earphones. I have on headphones on my ears. Why do you think I have on headphones? Oh, yeah. That's a really good question. Translation, of course. Translation. Live translation. So you have countries from different languages, speaking different languages here. You have countries, persons speaking different languages right there in the hall. And so it's really good to get that real-time translators. We have, I can't remember, please, I think is it 6 approved language? I cannot remember offhand. I don't know if Terrell or Tisha can unmute themselves or remind me of the approved languages. But yes, I can't remember right now, but I will let.
So I think
yes.
I think there's English, Spanish, French. Dutch. I'm missing, I think it's 6 or 9 languages.
Yes. Which is absolutely very important. Now, yes, somebody had mentioned something about video and audio in COP. I think there's definitely guidance about video and audioing at COP. I cannot say specifically right now what that is directly, but there is guidance on video recording, specifically recording at the COP venue, etc. I cannot remember right now, but that is guidance that is provided as well. Okay, someone said, how would you describe the roles between delegations, government, private sector representatives at COP? Okay, let me go back to this first picture as well. Okay, so if you've noticed, those at the back here aren't at a desk. So they don't have microphone privileges. And then what you notice when you go forward here to the negotiators that they're at a desk, they have microphone privileges. Let me go back to where that comment is. Oh my God, sorry. Right. So the delegations that are part of the negotiating teams, because you can have big delegations, but out of that, only 2 or 3 negotiators, right? The negotiators for parties specifically, which is representatives from the focal groups, will sit to the front, and their role is to negotiate the text. And then you will have private sector representatives and NGOs that may be given space at the back. So Tisha can tell you a little bit more, let's say, for example, with CARICOM or OECS, where they would sit and what really their roles would be in the plenary sessions and in the working sessions at COP. Sorry, I think maybe she's.
Hi, Crystal. Sorry, you asked a question. Could you repeat?
So they wanted to know, okay, so while we have the negotiators in the delegation sitting at the front where they can input and have their microphones on and off, they wanted to know like about private sectors and civil society organizations, etc., what their roles are usually is in the forum.
So private sector registered entities, private sector civil society have once they're registered can make interventions during plenary sessions once they provide their statements in advance, and they will be called upon by the chair when the time permits to make a statement on behalf of the private sector or civil society organization. But they usually sit to the back and have to have a nameplate in order to make those interventions.
Thank you so much.
Hey, Crystal, if I could also just add from the perspective of GYBN, given that we are official youth constituency, we also have observer status, so we also participate in the negotiating room, and we are able to make interventions as well. But I wouldn't get into the technicality that GYBN has a policy team that usually, attend and track all these negotiations and make interventions as well. So that's also just something else to note.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm aware of time, and so I need to go. I need to press on with these slides, but love the comments. We'll see if there's any more questions to go through. So these interventions are what we would use this microphone to be able to do when it comes to negotiating the text. And so the persons that are sitting to help mediate the sessions are what we would call chairs, and they have a very hard, demanding job to sit and to ensure that for the most part parties are able to make their interventions, which is to come in the mic and to say whether or not they'd like to change the text, etc., and to balance the viewpoints that they're hearing and to be able to help the audience and parties to come to a consensus so that we can move on with the text and to move it to a CRP and then eventually to almost approved document, which is called an L document, so that they can come back at the larger plenary for all of us to say, yes, we approve this document and it is now legally unbinding to the convention. And this is one of the chairs. Man, he had a very interesting time being chair, and he did it so well because there were some very strong topics that countries and their blocs felt very strongly about. It's definitely a very good skill to be able to be chair, and it's something that the world really does need. So yeah, you can aspire to be a chair in the future. But outside of what's happening with the hardcore negotiations, a lot of important side events are occurring. This is a side event with CBF as well as OECS, and they're talking about, panel discussions with biodiversity financing, etc. These side events are happening at the same time. So sometimes negotiators are not able to attend all of them, but you as youth, you can. And this is something that I'd really like to encourage you to join as much of these side events as you possibly can. Also know that at these side events, they always have food and snacks and drinks for free. So I would say if you're on a budget, these are the events that you go to, you learn, you network, and you're fed. Okay, win-win-win situation. Definitely go to this. But know that during COP, things can get heated. In that text can be so strongly felt that parties can get up and huddle. One party might be the one person to break, the back and forth, and this one party doesn't want to concede, and they did say they concede, and then we think we are almost there, and then they come back and they say they changed their mind for this event. This was India, and a discussion was made where everybody was like, oh no, what has happened? A big huddling started happening. As you can see, the media is there. This is approved COP media as well, videotaping, recording everything that's happening. It can get very tense. It can get very tense. But on the same breath, you can be there for hours. And yes, I did get permission to send this. You could be, I'm telling you, this night here, and this is going to be the speaker for next week, who is absolutely amazing. But this night here, we were up for 48 hours. I am not kidding you. We were awake 6 o'clock on the Thursday, and we went home 6 o'clock on the Friday morning to end COP. We were there for 2 days in the venue. No shower. The food court was closed in the night. We were surviving on apples and disky biscuit, okay? And water from the fountain. We were there. We spent time working. Countries are working overtime, right? COP and all that. Listen, COP sometimes can be a struggle. It can be a struggle in the case where food is limited. What you're paying for the food is 3 times the price on the outside. It could be the case where the food runs out because there's so much of people, so all that you got is coffee and ice cream for you to eat. The food might not be to your tasting and flavor. So I'm giving you the good and the ugly. You need to be balanced about this. COP is a sacrifice and an act of love and labor. Okay? There are days where it is great, and there are days where it's not great, where the food is not good, you can't stomach the spices, where there's no place to sit and eat, you're sitting on the floor. I am kidding you not. You're sitting on the floor, you're sitting on the step, you're bracing on the wall, you're sitting by the pot, you're sitting on the pot with the plant because there's nowhere else for you to sit. Okay, you brace up in a corner. You're splitting a sandwich with a friend because that was the last sandwich that you had, okay, that they had. You're drinking coffee because there's nothing else to eat. Or you're waiting, it's too long for you to wait for something else to be cooked. So while there's glimmers and glamours, okay, there's also this Actually, no, they don't necessarily encourage. You can go in with food and fruits and so on. You can just know that it's going to be scanned through security. But remember, you're in a different country, my love. So where you're hotting up your food and where you're getting this food from. If you're there from morning and you leave at night and you barely make it home and you're tired and know you're young people, you might go out for a little bit. When you're getting food to take there the next morning, you know, like, so also take that into consideration. But you can sometimes walk with food into the venue. Just know that all of that needs to go through security, right? Sorry about that. And let me tell you, it can be hard because I started the day off looking very bright, and this was after 2 days of us negotiating. I mean, this is the COP president as well. We were tired, man. We were tired. We couldn't come. The sentences weren't sentencing in. You know, it was very, very difficult to be a negotiator. You've got to stay focused, because if you don't stay focused, there might be lines, there might be information, there might be text that's passed that might disadvantage youths, or that might disadvantage small island developing states, etc. So it is definitely an act of love for you to stay awake, stay focused, and to keep going. But moments like this, where people are celebrating and they're excited and they're joyous and they're happy, this is where we have decided to add that new subsidiary body I told you about, the subsidiary body in Article 8J for Indigenous peoples. Let me tell you, when that was passed, everything stopped. The noise, the Indigenous peoples and the activist groups, and then they started coming and they were chanting and dancing and I had a video of it, but then I couldn't keep that video because I was technically not supposed to have a video of it. So yes, it was chanting and it was absolutely amazing. Amazing that you were part of something monumental like this. It's now a permanent part of the convention, and you've witnessed that the Indigenous groups that were there pleading to ensure that this happened from around the world saw it happen in their lifetime. So there's good, there's hard times, but we are there for moments like that where we champion the world, we take the world farther. And there are moments where you observe all of the culture, all of the people, all of the traditions, all of the clothes, the smells, the flowers in their hair, the difference in their tone of voice, the food that they eat. Sometimes they share some chocolate or coffee with you that just is phenomenal from their country. It's absolutely a melting pot of cultures at COP. And what's going on with this picture? Anyways, I've made very great friends from around the world as activists. I've got to see talents from around the world. I've got to work with some of the brightest and the smartest within my Caribbean region, CBF, OECS. I've been able to work with CARICOM. I've been able to work with one of Guyana's leading technical advisors for negotiations within the Caribbean, Dr. Chesney. I've been able to do amazing work. And so COP being there, and as well, you know, I did a little bit of sightseeing as well, because for the COP in Colombia, they had what was called a green zone that was also a part of COP. And it was there for the public, for NGOs, conservation groups from around the world, Indigenous groups from around the world to come and to talk about COP. And it was there at a big expo throughout the country in Colombia. And so I was able to experience all of that, every single element of COP. So when you think about COP, don't just think about it as this miraculous, amazing place. There's struggles, but think about why we're doing the struggles for people like me and your countries, for it to survive. And COP is such a balancing experience in your life. It makes you very grateful for everything that you've been able to experience. You know, decisions that were made, I was able to see this. I was able to see us being able to mobilize money. I was able to be there when we had a subsidiary body for Indigenous peoples and local communities. And this is very close to my heart because I work with Indigenous peoples and local communities in the Caribbean, in Guyana. So this was a big monumental event for us, We talked about digital sequencing information, and Tisha brought this up. There was a fund that was created for this, and we have a system of being able to plan what our actions are going to be for countries. Really, really momentous outcomes, right? So I'm gonna skip this slide because I don't have the time. And the youth priorities came through with GYBN. So much the youth was able to push for their position papers. Your group, your youths were able to talk about human rights approach. Okay, the group was able to talk about education and awareness, intergenerational equity. The fact that equitable distribution needed to be there in terms of the funding for countries, that youths are rights holders as well, and not just participants, and their voices need to be included in the way governments plan their actions for biodiversity through their national biodiversity actions, strategy and action plans. Big. We even had, from one of our huddles in the morning, a youth representative come and sit and talk to us about what they felt about the DSI and what they felt about Article HA. Youths have voices, and at COPs, it's amplified. It was monumental. It was amazing. So for you, you need to make your voices heard through this, As young people from your country, know what your country's issues are when it comes to conservation and what their action plans are. Know your focal point. Be strategic. See how your local group, as well as this group, can be a part of shaping the documents that come out of the country and come out of the Caribbean. Attend everything when you go to COP. Use social media, network, build your LinkedIn, build your network, be a part of the process, When you get to COP, prepare yourself, got your passport ready, research the country, be ready to be an active member of it. And when you get to COP, read, stay up to date with what's happening. This is not just for an experience, be in the know, be a part of it. Thank you so, so much for being a part of my presentation for tonight. This was COP16 symbol, the leaf of life, no, the eternal, I can't remember what it was. It's a flower. I can't remember what the everlasting flower, I can't remember what it was, but basically it's giving the flower never dies. There's a seed that always grows. I cannot remember right now, but thank you so much for staying to the end. I hope I brought you up to date with COP. I hope it was interesting. I hope you did get a good understanding of COP. Thank you so much for giving me the platform, guys. This is definitely my cue to close off.
Good night, Crystal. Thank you so, so much. This presentation was extremely comprehensive, and I like that it showed the realness of COP, not just the excitingness that comes with traveling to a new country and meeting new people, but actually what happens within the venue and the sacrifices that have to be made to ensure that we stick to these goals to assist the region. And it also showed how everything is integrated, the whole intersectionality of it all when it comes to Indigenous people, Indigenous knowledge, countries and their status and all of that. So I really enjoyed it. I really do hope that the attendees enjoyed it as well. And if there are any additional questions to be asked, so they are commending you as well for your wonderful presentation
Okay.
and its insightfulness. There is one question that we have at the end here that we can close with.
Sure.
It says, how can we hold governments accountable without stepping on the wrong toes?
Very good question. Again, knowing your focal points. For the most part, a lot of your focal points may have organized activities or initiatives that may involve young people. I think it's really important to go to a lot of the forums that they may have, open days, etc., when they're dealing with development projects, when they're launching a new development, etc. Be there, ask questions, understand the process, but also advocate for young people to be a part of the process. And not to advocate to say, well, why don't you have young people? Advocate is to always advocate with solutions. I really believe that this would be more impactful if we had youth groups. For example, we'd be willing to do A, B, and C to support you. So really be able to show how you as a youth group can be instrumental, because understand that the government, and most importantly the focal points, they're doing a lot, trust me, and they would love the support, but they want to see that support through solutions. So be very clear on what you're able to do and to be able to support.
Thank you for that wonderful answer, Crystal. So with that, we will now close session 4. Thank you to all the attendees for coming out tonight and putting yourselves up to learn this type of information that would definitely be applicable to your future assignments. And thank you to Crystal, even though Tisha has left already. Thank you to Tisha as well for an insightful presentation. I'm pretty sure that the attendees have learned a lot tonight, and not just to apply it within this course, but externally as well in their future careers, if they do go to the negotiation aspect of things with biodiversity. So once again, thank you to everyone for coming out tonight, and I hope that you all enjoy the rest of your week. All right. Good night, everyone.